So this chart was interesting to me, or rather, this question was interesting to me because usually when we see questions of this sort on Reddit, the person gives us a synastry, which I hate and which I don't really bother with. And so I usually ignore those synastries and move on to something else. But here, the person offered their natal chart and asked why. And actually, they gave a little bit more information here. Wait, where was it? Oh, here. I know I'd be better off alone, yet I can't seem to leave. I let myself be used and treated poorly consistently. Why am I so empathetic, kind to others that don't deserve it? So the empathy part, of course, would come from whom or from where? So signs like Pisces, planets like Venus, etc. Yes. And so I thought I would look at this particular chart and this question from the lens, or from the lens of the two types of mind, the intellective mind and the non-intellective mind, the sensitive mind. So based on our powers of the soul, or how to locate the soul based on the medieval techniques, and then also just based on the condition of Venus as well, who is also the goddess of love and represents kind of all rather deeper interpersonal relationships. So the first thing that we notice is that Venus is in the sixth house, which is called bad fortune. She's on the cusp of the sixth. So we were putting her in there. As a matter of fact, what's the actual cusp? 16. So she's within 5 degrees. She's retrograde. She's in the sign of her detriment, and she is combust. Now, the combustion thing is probably really one of the major problems, because this would this would kind of put a sheen on anything love related, and but not a true sheen, right? It would make it shiny. This is a true example of all that glitters is not gold, right? The sun rules gold. And so the sun's here with Venus, and the sun is exalted. And so we know that when planets are combusted, what happens? They become husked out. And the sun absorbs their significations and takes them on as his own. So she, more than likely, when she falls in love, or gets blinded, the sun is blinding this person. The Venus is retrograding towards it. So, really, this Venus is in really not very good shape at all. And of course, the Venus rules the seventh house of relationships and marriage, etc. Venus is also the natural lady of marriage. Note also, Venus is applying to Jupiter. Both Jupiter and Venus are retrograde. Venus is applying to Jupiter, to the opposition of Jupiter. What do I call Venus Jupiter? Too much of a good thing. And we tend to find this in charts of addicts, right? We looked at the Billie Holiday chart. We've seen many, many charts where what I usually say is, when I see Venus Jupiter, I say, well, what part of their life is out of control? Right? Where is the part that's out of control? Usually that would be where Pisces is, right? Because because Venus is rather, Jupiter is the domicile ruler, and Venus is the exaltation ruler of Pisces, right? So when those two planets are together in any way, usually, but specifically the conjunction and the opposition, the hard and the square, the hard aspects, there can be an addictive nature. There can be, like I said, a too much of a good thing, or that which starts out really well becomes, we just do too much, and it starts out pleasurable, and then before we know it, it's become a compulsion that we can't stop, which is kind of where they are, right? That kind of explains quite a bit. So we know that two things just universally with Venus as the ruler of the Venus just herself, there's going to be that inclination. Then doubling that and putting it with Taurus, right, with the sign of Taurus, which is on the cusp of the seventh, and Taurus is a fixed sign, right? So she's asking why she can't give it up, right? Fixed signs hold on, right? Fixed signs don't let go easily, right? So that means, in my opinion, that we've got universally the Venus Jupiter, the condition of Venus, and the Venus Jupiter help, and Venus Jupiter being a problem. Some would ask me, well, do you think that Jupiter might help the Venus? Like I said, no, I don't think so, because Venus Jupiter conjunctions and oppositions have a tendency to represent, as from what I've seen in charts over and over again, too much of a good thing, and a real kind of hyper focus on that thing that they believe gives them pleasure. And also remember that the fifth house is the house of pleasure, right? So it's children and it's sensual pleasures and delights, right? So it's the things that bring us pleasure. And we see that the Mercury is here. So just taking that into mind when we think about what is might be out of control, this idea of pleasure may be an aspect of what's out of control. And I'm also wondering if there might be an obsession with having children. Because because Jupiter, or rather, the fifth house is the house of children, and the Mercury is also there. Mercury is the intellective mind. So let's talk about that for a second now too, because um, those of you who watch the videos or know that there's a very specific technique for kind of locating the soul in a natal chart. And usually that means that you're looking at the moon and Mercury and the planets that rule them generally, right? And so that would be and that kind of gives us an idea. Also, it tends to also show us what the planet, shall we say, that is that might be kind of a significator for the soul based on if they're both applying to that planet, or if one is applying and the other is separating. So if there's kind of a mutual relationship, or if they're both in signs that are ruled by the same planet, right? So generally there can be, so we have like three kind of criteria we can look at. We're going to be looking at the moon and Mercury and the signs that they're in. We'll look at the planets who rule them, and then we'll look also at any planet that might show up as a significator. So the first thing that comes to mind is that just like there is a rational mind and a non-rational mind or sensitive mind, and of course the moon represents the non-rational sensitive mind, which would represent the instincts, our tastes and and internal inclinations, the things that we desire, our appetites, what we tend to kind of naturally go for, and our reflexes, so our reflexive actions and autonomic responses, so all the things that are ruled by the non-rational mind, that doesn't do specifically the learning. We can say the non-rational mind might do the processing, but the actual, or maybe not, maybe we could even say the intellective is what takes in all the information and organizes it, and etc., and then brings it out. If I remember, it was the difference between having an opinion, creating an opinion, and stating an opinion, right? So the ability to put what our mental stuff or our mentation into words, to organize our thinking, that's intellective mind, and that's Mercury. To So that's the difference that we have between those two. So there are rational signs, and there are signs that are, I won't call them irrational, but they would be more towards the sensitive or non-rational. So the rational signs are all the air signs, right? So Libra, Gemini, Aquarius, those are the rational signs. But then there are the signs that are instinctual, that are really kind of inherently instinctual, and those are the water signs. So Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio, and here we have the moon in Cancer and Mercury in Pisces. So we know already, just looking at these two planets, that this person may have a problem accepting the rational, right? This person is coming from feeling, is coming from emotion, might be very into sensation as well, coming from the closeness, the feeling of the closeness, the all of that kind of stuff, that can't might not be able to be put into words. That's where this person go. This person may also have problems communicating. So one of the reasons that this person might be having problems getting out of the relationship is because they might not know how to stand up for themselves. They might not know how to say what it is they need to say. Why? Because the water signs are mute, right? And so we have Mercury, who rules the tongue, in a mute sign, and then we've got the moon in her own sign of Cancer. So this person is really ruled by their emotions, ruled by their internal kind of instincts, and they may have a problem because, since it's Pisces, they may have a problem organizing things out, separating, compartmentalizing, right? Because everything about Pisces is the descent into the realm of sensation. And it's the opposite of Virgo, which is the library with the card catalog and everything in its place. Pisces, as I always say, is the flood that happens to the library. And after the flood, what does that fucking library look like? It looks like Pisces, right? It's a mess. Things are everywhere, right? So that's the whole kind of willy-nilly aspect of Pisces. On top of this, Mercury is in the sign of his fall, right? Virgo is the sign of Mercury's exaltation and domicile. So this is Mercury's detriment and fall, Pisces. So we have a very non-rational person. And now we have a very kind of non-rational person who really uh, goes from the emotion, right? They really project or initiate. They really initiate themselves from the emotion. Then we can see also that, okay, the moon is applying to the sun and Mercury is applying to Mars, right? So there doesn't look like there's any one planet that based on aspect that would be showing that, right? That would be showing that it might be a specific significator. But there is when we look actually at the dispositors of the signs. So Mercury is in Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. Moon is in Cancer, which we know as her domicile, but Jupiter is the exaltation ruler of Cancer. Now, this Jupiter, in my opinion, is not particularly helpful generally, right? He is on the cusp of the 12th. Let's see how close he is. 12th house within 4 degrees. So he's in the 12th. He's retrograde, right? He's opposing the sun. We know that planets that oppose the sun, so conjuncting or opposing the sun, tends to harm a planet. So I think that we can maybe look at this Jupiter, or rather, in my opinion, this Venus Jupiter opposition as kind of the significator of the soul, which then answers a lot of questions, right? So, in my opinion, so what should we tell the person that needs to happen? I think that this person needs to find a way to okay. I also think that maybe they can't come from a family, because usually our models for a relationship are in the family. I'm also wondering if this person comes from a family that is cold, rigid, very rational, and possibly fundamentalist, or fundamentalist in its upbringing, in its way of thinking. And that, in and of itself, might have given a sense of not feeling particularly loved or appreciated because of how emotional this person might be, and and thus they might be recreating that situation. So there's the foundational, right? Looking at the fourth house. But what would we say? What I would, and the reason I brought the fourth house is go back and look at some of the things that your family may have done, right? If indeed we're coming from the Saturn and Aquarius, right? That's his own sign. That makes that makes this particular Saturn, this planet, is the strongest planet in the chart. It's angular, it's in its own domicile, it's not a daytime chart, so not, and also we know that Saturn is connected to the fourth house because Saturn represents the diversion of waters. He represents agriculture. So already, and of course, the fourth house is called the terrestrial angle, or the and represents things on top of or under the ground. So looking at this very strong Saturn, as traumatic as maybe the upbringing may have been, there are aspects that more than likely come from your family, ways of organizing, ways of looking at things that might help you to organize yourself and make decisions. And I think this person gets caught in a what I usually call a vritti, which is a turning, a circle. It's basically kind of oh, this is always happening. When you hear people say, oh, this is always happening to me, I'm always detracting people like that, that's their vritti. And every area of our life has a vritti. It's a Sanskrit word. And it's the usage that it's best known is in yoga, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which basically describes yoga. Yoga chitta vritti naroda. So it's basically yoga is the ceasing of the turnings of the mind. And so this vritti is something that has to cease. I mean, so that's what, and this part of the vritti is the Venus Jupiter thing, right? So there's a need to self-regulate. And then the other side is the mind, who also can't self-regulate emotionally. So that's, and probably comes from a hyper-regulatory family situation, that they might be rebelling from, or they were just the black sheep, and weren't appreciated, as I've already said. And so the key to everything in this particular chart, in my opinion, especially noting that really the Venus Jupiter is probably the main significator for the soul. Self-regulation and the ability to create boundaries, right? Because Pisces is the opposite of a boundary, right? So Virgo is all the demarcations and lists and boundaries, right? Pisces is the opposite of that. So this person really needs self-regulation, and to really, really, really work on the definition of boundaries. What will I not accept? Basically, there's almost nothing they won't accept. The other thing is, if indeed they're just allowing themselves to be used and hurt and whatever else, may there be a kink in there? Might there be a kink in there to enjoy? Maybe instead of allowing yourself to be misused in a relationship, you formalize it and become a masochistic bottom, and start letting daddy misuse you instead, and go home to a nice healthy relationship. I think that there's an opportunity to use kink to work some of this bullshit out. That's what I have to say.